Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News. Hi there, very good afternoon to you. I'm Colin Brazier. This is GB News Live. Northern Ireland joins England in cutting the COVID quarantine period from 10 days to 7. Is the pressure mounting on the Scottish and Welsh governments to do the same? And it's a testing time for everyone as the lateral flow shortage continues. But have we reached the point where COVID has now more in common with the common cold? More on that in a moment. But first, the news headlines with Olivia.
Thank you, Colin. This is your news at 3 o'clock. A woman who claims she was trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein and abused by the Duke of York says others must be held accountable following Ghislaine Maxwell's conviction for sex abuse. Virginia Roberts, who was previously known as Virginia Giuffre, is bringing a civil case against Prince Andrew for alleged sexual assault. He denies any wrongdoing. 60-year-old Maxwell faces life in jail after being found guilty of 5 out of 6 charges for helping Epstein sexually abuse girls.
4 women were believed, and now Ghislaine Maxwell is a convicted sex trafficker facing the rest of her life probably in prison because of the courage, the tremendous courage of these 4 women, and also the hard work of the police and the prosecutors and the attorneys who brought this case to justice.
The NHS is due to set up Nightingale Hospital surge hubs in England to prepare for increasing cases of Omicron. Work on 8 hubs holding up to 100 patients each will start this week. The NHS is also ramping up the use of virtual wards at home, where patients get monitoring technology and regular check-ins with clinicians. Meanwhile, a survey has found nurses who are exhausted and overwhelmed by the pandemic are regularly working 12-hour shifts to keep the NHS afloat. The Royal College of Nursing questioned 9,000 staff and found that 74% regularly work beyond their shifts, mostly unpaid. The poll was carried out in October before Omicron hit. Many are unhappy with the quality of care they can provide due to inadequate staffing, and 60% are thinking of quitting. A coroner has ruled the Liverpool hospital bomber died from the explosion and fire caused by the improvised device he made with murderous intent. Iraqi-born Ahmad al-Swilmeen was killed when the bomb he made went off inside a taxi. The driver, David Perry, survived the blast. The explosion happened just before 11 a.m. on Remembrance Sunday. The coroner says it's still unclear whether he intended to detonate the device when it exploded. The Foreign Office is seeking urgent clarification after the French government banned British citizens from driving through France into other countries. Non-essential travel from the UK to France has been prohibited since December the 18th to limit the spread of Omicron, but several exemptions have been in place. Brits have now been told they cannot travel by car across the country to homes in other European Union states. The Home Secretary says the police have her full support when it comes to taking swift action against anti-vax protesters. That's after dozens of people entered a test and trace centre in Milton Keynes yesterday and appeared to damage testing equipment. Priti Patel says she's also bringing forward new measures to crack down on disruptive protests. The Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, says he's appalled by what he described as vile behaviour. From January, insurers will no longer be able to charge existing customers more to renew than they would new customers. It follows a review by the Financial Conduct Authority that found many insurers were increasing prices for renewing customers in a practice known as price walking. The new rules are expected to save consumers £4.2 billion over the next 10 years. That's your update. We'll be back in an hour with the latest headlines.
Well, the COVID story is moving a little bit, has moved a little bit in the last couple of hours. We heard in the news there, the Northern Ireland Executive has resisted reintroducing further COVID restrictions, but rather more than that, from tomorrow, people will be able to end their self-isolation after 7 days instead of 10, so long as they've had a negative test on days 6 and 7. That brings Northern Ireland into line with the situation in England. Of course, the isolation period remains 10 days in both Scotland and Wales as, well, what looks like further divergence emerges across the United Kingdom in response to the Omicron variant. Well, Stephen Black is the headmaster of the Ballymena Academy, and he's told our Northern Ireland reporter, Dougie Beattie, it's a relief that schools will reopen as planned next week.
Us in education, I think we want to do the best thing by our young people. And the best thing for our young people is to be in school. Provided the medical experts are saying that it's possible to do so, I think we should be doing everything to try and ensure that that's the case. We have been fortunate, our staff here are very committed, and we haven't had any issues so far in terms of being able to continue with all our young people in school all of the time. It could be a possibility that later on that becomes more challenging. We would certainly prioritise those who are sitting external examinations this year. That would be our A-level, AS level and GCSE year groups would be the ones that we would prioritise to be in school. I think that certainly for them, they've already missed a lot. And I think that with examinations still on the table, and I think that is the right thing for them to be on the table, but with them on the table, I think it's very important that the young people are in school. Neither academically nor in terms of their personal development are young people at the state that we have expected them to have been in normally. And while schools, one aspect of schools is certainly academic development. The other aspect is that whole social development process for young people, whether it be through developing routines, whether it be through support networks that they have to help them, or whether it's just developing qualities such as resilience. They can do that far better in school with the support that's there for them, and even the activities that they can take part in school that allow them to develop those qualities.
Latest figures from the Zoe COVID study suggest 3/4 of people who suffered common cold symptoms over the past few weeks have actually had COVID. Dr. Claire Stevers, a scientist on the study, has urged the government to add symptoms such as a sore throat, headache and runny nose to its official list of COVID symptoms as soon as possible. Previous symptoms such as a fever, new continuous cough and a loss of sense of taste or smell are thought to be now much less common. Well, the Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, has told MPs the government will treble the supply of lateral flow tests from 100 to 300 million in January and February in response to current high demand. People have struggled to access supplies at pharmacies, some pharmacies, and the NHS website since the time you have to spend in isolation, as we mentioned earlier, in England was cut from 10 days to 7 last week. Mr. Javid also warned there will be further supply problems in the short term over the next fortnight or so. It seems to be a global supply chain problem, we're told. Now, Ghislaine Maxwell has been found guilty of recruiting and trafficking young girls to be sexually abused by the late American financier Jeffrey Epstein. The 60-year-old was found guilty on 5 of the 6 counts she faced, including the most serious charge, that of sex trafficking a minor. Earlier, I was joined in the studio by the commentator Benedict Spence. He told me why the British media and others have been so drawn to this dreadful story?
All facets of the story. It's got something for everybody. Links to sort of American high society, British high society, the royal family. There are, links to Jeffrey Epstein was friends with everybody. Ghislaine Maxwell knew everybody, and it is fascinating, isn't it, that as much as we're talking about Ghislaine, this sort of very accomplished woman, this very personable woman, actually throughout the trial, it's the spectre of Jeffrey Epstein himself has sort of hung over it. There has been this sort of feeling that, as much as she is on trial, this is as much his trial as anything else, because, of course, justice has been denied to the victims. I wouldn't say to Jeffrey Epstein himself. I don't think death is escaping justice, but certainly in terms of what his victims would have wanted, that was a very unsatisfactory outcome. So that, I think, has intensified all the interest into this trial. I thought it was very interesting. The Times have run a good piece on this, where they pointed out that Ghislaine Maxwell's father, when he was still Jan Huk rather than Robert Maxwell, when he was still in Czechoslovakia during the Second World War, he was tried by the Nazis for espionage, but he escaped on his way to court. But no such sort of escape for Ghislaine Maxwell, as harsh a sentence as you could possibly imagine. Whether or not she serves all 65 years or whether or not they are sort of combined and run concurrently is yet to be seen. But nonetheless, it's something, again, to use a cliche, it has gripped people's attention, because these sort of stories, they don't come along that often. And it is always people like that sort of pull the most focus.
That was Benedict Spence talking to me earlier. Now, 92 convicted terrorists have been considered for release from prison by the parole board, these inmates. Often participants in plots that failed only through the intervention of the security services. Terror offenders must now serve 2/3 of their sentence before being eligible for release. Earlier, I spoke to Sir Mark Lyle-Grant, former UK ambassador to the United Nations, but in relation to this story, and more pertinently, a former national security advisor, who explained why it is that so many convicted terrorists are being considered right now for parole.
Well, I think this is a sign, actually, that the new system is working, because before the legislation that you mentioned that was introduced in February 2020, some of these terrorists would have already been released automatically after serving only half of their sentence. But over the last 2 years, they now have to serve at least 2/3 of their sentence, and then could be eligible to have a hearing before the parole board. So I don't think it's surprising that there are a number in the pipeline. Over the last 4 years, there have been about between 200 and 250 convicted terrorists in British jails at any one time. And that number has remained largely constant over that period. The large majority of those are Islamist terrorists, although there is a rising number of right-wing extremists in prison as well. And over the last 2 years, since this new legislation has passed, about 110 to 115 of those have been presented before the parole board. But of those, only 11, so less than 10%, have actually been released. The rest have either been sent back to prison or are waiting for their hearings to be heard.
So they're certainly not. Let's tell you a bit more about what's happening in today's news for you now. A little bit back to COVID, a story we missed rather. The NHS due to set up Nightingale Hospital surge hubs, as they're being called, 8 of them, in England this is, to prepare for increasing cases, should they come, of Omicron. Work on those 8 hubs. Each holds up to 100 patients each. They'd be in the latter stages of COVID and not serious cases. It will start this week. We're told by NHS England that further sites could be identified to add a further 4,000 surge beds, should they be required. The Liverpool Women's Hospital bomber died from the explosion and fire caused by the IED, the improvised device he made with, quote, murderous intent. This is from a coroner ruling today. The Iraqi-born Imad al-Swilman was killed when his bomb went off with him inside the taxi he was travelling in, the taxi driven by David Perry, who, of course, survived the blast. The coroner said it remained unclear as to whether he intended for the device to detonate when it did and where it did too. The former American President George W. Bush, who was responsible for ordering the war on terror and deploying troops to Iraq and Afghanistan, has admitted that he knew very little about international affairs. Official documents released from the archives today revealed that President Bush, who was at the time the governor of Texas, made his admission to the former British ambassador to the United States, Sir Christopher Maher, in February 1998. That was prior to the Republicans' presidential run. Well, President Bush said he knew little about Prime Minister Tony Blair or his new Labour project, but the seeds of the Blair-Bush political loving were sown during the 1998 visit, Bush telling Sir Christopher that he thought Blair seemed like a good chap. Earlier, I spoke to Sir Christopher Maher about his recollection of that meeting.
I'm not at all surprised to hear that a governor of Texas didn't know much about the wider world. Not at all surprised that somebody who eventually became President of the United States, and that was 3 years later after this meeting, didn't know anything really significant about the world at that time. And I have to say that a year later, when I returned to Texas to see Governor George W. Bush again, he had by then just about decided to declare his run for the presidency and had created a kind of brains trust of mighty experts on foreign policy to give him teach-ins on the various issues around the world. 3 years.
Former British ambassador to the United States there, Sir Christopher Maher, talking to me a little earlier on. Coming up next, we've got a look at what's been an amazing year in space. Some of those space billionaires splashing the cash and going into orbit. That's from me, an obsession and a hobby horse this year for you. But first, the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there. As we approach a New Year's Eve, things look decidedly mild, wet for some, and a fair amount of cloud. But today we've seen some favoured spots, seeing summer brighter weather. But this weather front straddles more central parts of the country, moving slowly northwards, bringing with it some high rainfall totals as we head into a New Year's Eve. And you can see it's rather windy across many parts of the country. So through Thursday evening and overnight, you can see this rain moving up towards northern England, southern Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some heavy bursts to come, and we will see the highest rainfall totals for the Lake District as well as Dumfries and Galloway. Further south, more rain returns to Wales as well as the West Country. By dawn tomorrow, will be across central southern England, pushing quite quickly towards the southeast as well as the Midlands and East Anglia. It's a mild night leading into a mild start to New Year's Eve. Through the day then tomorrow, we'll see this rain just stall across central and southern parts of Scotland as well as northern England. It will dry up across Northern Ireland, even some brighter skies further south across England and Wales, as well as the far northeast of Scotland. And even where we see this rain, it will fade as we head through into evening time. So if you are stepping out through a New Year's Eve evening, it's worth noting the winds will pick up further strength, particularly towards the west. It'll be mostly dry, perhaps some drizzly bits and pieces over the southern uplands as well as Pennine districts before more rain arrives through the latter part of the night across northern England as well as Scotland. And again, that will push through quite quickly with that strong wind. It will be an exceptionally mild start to 2022. But we will again see some showers move in from the west, brighter skies ahead of it, and again that keen breeze with gales across western facing coasts. All in all, temperatures will hold up in double figures away from the north. But as we head into Sunday, things turn very windy in the south and colder from the north. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.